Hello, I'm Psychology Professor Bruce Hinrichs. In this video, I'm going to talk about the hemispheres of the brain. The very top wrinkly part of the brain is called the cerebrum, and the cerebrum is divided to a left side and a right side that are called left and right hemispheres, and the groove that runs from front to back is called the longitudinal fissure. So the top wrinkly part of our brain, the cerebrum, has a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. There are lots of ideas that you'll hear about left and right hemispheres that they are very, very different from one another, and this is really wrong. The left and right hemispheres usually coordinate together. There's a few differences that I'm going to talk about in this video, but they usually work together because they have a communication system, a link called the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum connects the left and right hemispheres. It is like a cable, a bundle of nerve fibers that carry signals back and forth between the two hemispheres. Here in this brain slice, we very clearly see the left and right hemispheres and that white band of fibers that connects the two. That is the corpus callosum. And in this illustration, we see some MRI images that show the left and right hemispheres of the cerebrum. Here we see a real human brain. The top wrinkly part is the cerebrum, and we see the left hemisphere. And here the top wrinkly part is the right hemisphere of the cerebrum. The left hemisphere is much better at some functions or abilities than the right hemisphere, and the right hemisphere is much better at some other things. This concept is called lateralization. Lateral means to the side. So lateralization means that there are some abilities or functions that are better done by one hemisphere than the other. One of the first people to discover localization of function in the brain cerebrum was Dr. Wilder Penfield, who was doing brain surgery on people to help them with their epilepsy. Here we see an illustration of his brain surgery. He would electrically stimulate a certain area, and he discovered, for example, that a person would move their left finger when stimulated in a certain area, and in a different area they would hear a saxophone playing, and so on. One of the most studied differences between left and right hemispheres is in most people, the left hemisphere is very good at language, whereas the right hemisphere is very good at spatial perception. One way that we measure spatial perception is the mental rotation test. Here's an example. Look at problem A. You look at the image on the left and you ask yourself, can that image be rotated to the position seen on the right? The answer is either yes or no. And then do B, and then do C. We're asking, can the image on the left be rotated to the same position as the image on the right? And the answer for A is yes, it can. And the answer for B, yes, it can. And the answer for C, no, it cannot. Now, when we give 100 items like this to people, we discover that on the average, men do better than women on spatial perception. This is a right hemisphere task. However, if we give a left hemisphere task, a problem with language, for example, a verbal ability test, on the average, women do better. So women do better on language on the average, and men do better on spatial perception. It is popularly believed that there are these giant differences between men and women in psychological characteristics. This is not correct. There are very, very few differences, and the differences that exist, like verbal ability and spatial perception, these are very, very small differences. Here, this illustration is shown. showing the differences are very, very small. If you look at the average score of men on any particular psychological variable, there are many, many, many women who fall above or below that, and similarly the other way around. So there are very, very few differences between men and women, and the differences are very small. A recent study called a meta-analysis. In a meta-analysis, we take many, many different studies and combine them into one gigantic study. A recent meta-analysis of sex differences found 4 differences. For example, men do slightly better than women on mental rotation, feeling that beauty is important in selection of a mate, in being more aggressive, and in being confident in their physical ability. On the other hand, women score higher than men by a little bit on noticing noxious stimulation, on attachment to their peers, interest in people versus interest in things, and in fear induced by watching a film or a video. All right, now back to the hemispheres. It turns out that when it comes to our body is connected to our hemispheres in most cases in reverse. This is called contralateral. Contra means like opposite, and lateral means to the side. So contralateral means opposite side. Moving your body, for example, is contralateral, and touching things with your body is contralateral. So to move your right hand requires a signal coming from your left hemisphere. But if you touch something with your right hand, the signal will be sent to the left hemisphere. Now, smell, on the other hand, is not contralateral. Smell is called ipsilateral. Ipsa means same, lateral to the side. So ipsilateral means same side. That is, the molecules that go into your right nostril will stimulate cells that send a signal to your right hemisphere. Hearing is a little more complicated. When a sound goes in the left ear, it stimulates cells in the ear that send an electrical signal first to the lower part of the brain called the brain stem. In the lower part of the brain, there are little software computers that figure out the location of where the sound is coming from and also the pitch of the sound. And then the signal is sent up to both left and right hemispheres, to the auditory cortex, the place in the hemispheres that will hear the sound. So the left ear really is sending signals to both left and right hemispheres. The same thing with the right ear. The signal goes first to the brain stem, the lower part of the brain, and then divides and goes both to left and right. So hearing is both contralateral and ipsilateral, but it's a little more contralateral. That is, the left ear sends a little bit more signal to the right hemisphere, and the right ear sends a little more signal to the left hemisphere. Vision is maybe the most difficult to understand. We perceive vision in the very back of the cerebrum. And the cells in the back receive signals, of course, from the eyes. So light goes in the eyes, stimulates receptors in the eyes that send signals way to the back in the brain. Now, the way it works is the left side of each eye is connected to the left hemisphere of the brain, and the right side of each eye is connected to the right hemisphere of each brain. So look at the illustration. The left side of the left eye and the left side of the right eye are both connected to the left hemisphere, but the left side of the eye sees things on the right. So look at the illustration. Images in the right field of vision stimulate cells on the left side of each eye, and the left side of each eye are connected to the left hemisphere. The result is that the left hemisphere sees things on the right, and the right hemisphere sees things on the left. So we would say vision is contralateral, opposite side, with respect to the visual field. This illustration shows that vision is contralateral with respect to the field of vision. An apple is on the left field of vision, Therefore, it stimulates cells on the right side of the eye. The right side of the eye, which eye? Both eyes. The right side of each eye is connected to the right hemisphere. So the right hemisphere sees the apple. The bird is in the right visual field, therefore it stimulates cells in the left side of the eye. And the left side of the eye, which eye? Both eyes. They're connected. Those left sides of each eye are connected to the left hemisphere. So the left hemisphere sees the bird. Of course, we have a corpus callosum. So our left hemisphere can tell our right hemisphere what it sees, and our right hemisphere can tell our left hemisphere what it sees. So we put it together in our brain so that we perceive the whole visual field. Again, this illustration shows that if an object is in the left field of vision, like the mushroom, this will stimulate cells on the right side of each eye, which send signals to the right hemisphere. So the right hemisphere receives the signals about the mushroom. The frog, on the other hand, is in the right field of vision, so it stimulates cells on the left side of the eye, which is connected to the left hemisphere, so the left hemisphere sees the frog. But of course, we have a corpus callosum that shares this information. What about more cognitive functions of the hemispheres? Yes, there are some slight differences. For example, the left hemisphere seems to use logic a little better than the right hemisphere. It does analysis, that is, breaks things down into their bits, is of course important for language, as already mentioned, and focuses usually on details rather than the whole picture. The right hemisphere, on the other hand, tends to be more global in the way it perceives the world, more holistic, that it's better at maps and patterns and faces, where you're putting things together, synthesizing rather than analyzing. So left hemisphere more language and analysis, and right hemisphere more spatial, global, and synthesizing. That brings us to the end of this video on brain hemispheres. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a little bit. Watch some more of my videos on my channel, Brucey. I have a lot of videos on psychology. Bye.